Hidden in the rolling green hills of eastern Oklahoma lies a secret that very few Americans truly know. A secret that speaks of a powerful civilization, a forgotten city, and a culture that flourished long before Columbus set sail across the Atlantic. This is the story of Spiro Mounds, a site once filled with life, ceremony, power, and mystery. It is a place that has been called the most important ancient site in North America, and yet for decades it was nearly erased from memory. Tonight we will journey into the lost world of Spiro, a civilization that time nearly destroyed, but one that continues to whisper through the earth. If you're enjoying this journey into the mysteries of the past, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support gives us the courage to bring you even more fascinating stories, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a like and share your opinion in the comments below. More than 1,000 years ago, long before Oklahoma was called Oklahoma, and long before the prairies were fenced and plowed, the land was home to a great Native American culture. Archaeologists call it the Mississippian culture, a network of cities, villages, and ceremonial centers that stretched from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. At its heart was a system of earthworks, platform mounds, temples, and plazas, where people gathered to trade, worship, and honor their dead. One of the greatest of these centers was Spiro. Between the years 800 and 1450, this place was a thriving city, a hub of politics, religion, and trade. Imagine standing in a vast open plain. Rising around you are large earth mounds, carefully shaped by hand over generations. People are moving in long processions, carrying offerings, singing songs, and lighting fires for ceremonies. Priests in elaborate costumes direct the rituals, and rulers sit on platforms overlooking the crowd. It is not just a village, it is a sacred capital, a place where the earthly and the spiritual meet. Spiro's influence reached far beyond Oklahoma. Artifacts found here prove that the people of Spiro traded with distant lands. They received copper from the Great Lakes, seashells from the Gulf of Mexico, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, and turquoise from the American Southwest. In return, they shared their own goods, their art, and their ideas. This was not an isolated community. It was part of a vast network, a continent-wide civilization that rivaled the great societies of the Old World. Inside the mounds, archaeologists discovered treasures that stunned the world. Carved stone pipes in the shape of animals and humans, delicately woven fabrics preserved by the earth, ceremonial masks, pearl beads, effigy vessels, and copper plates hammered into shining designs. Some of the copper artifacts bear the image of the Birdman, a powerful figure in Mississippian religion. Others depict animals like owls, bears, and serpents. Each artifact was not just decoration. It was part of a sacred story, a mythological world that gave meaning to life and death. Spiro was, above all, a spiritual center. The great mound, known as Craig Mound, contained chambers filled with offerings and burials. When archaeologists opened these chambers, they found something astonishing: preserved textiles, feather capes, and wooden carvings that had survived for centuries. These discoveries changed the way we understand Native American history. For the first time, scholars could see the complexity and richness of a culture that had often been dismissed as primitive. And yet, the story of Spiro is not only about glory, it is also about tragedy. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, a group of men calling themselves the Pocola Mining Company leased the land and began digging into Craig Mound. They were treasure hunters, not scientists. They tunneled into the mound, blasting it apart with dynamite, pulling out artifacts by the thousands. Many were sold to collectors, others were lost forever. Priceless objects that could have told us about the past were scattered across the world. Archaeologists later called it one of the greatest cultural crimes in American history. Still, even with the destruction, enough remained to reveal the extraordinary nature of Spiro. The artifacts that survived told us about ceremony and power, about a belief system that connected the living with the dead. The rulers of Spiro were not only political leaders, they were spiritual mediators, people who could speak with the world of the ancestors and the gods. Their authority was based on sacred knowledge, and their burials were filled with symbols of this power. The layout of the site itself tells us about its meaning. The mounds were not placed randomly. They were aligned with the movements of the sun and the stars, marking solstices and equinoxes. The plazas between the mounds were gathering places where thousands of people might have assembled for feasts and rituals. Fires burned through the night, drums echoed across the land, and dances told the stories of creation and destruction. For the people of Spiro, life was woven into a cosmic pattern, and every ritual was a way of keeping balance in the world. But as powerful as Spiro was, it did not last forever. By the mid-1400s, the site was abandoned, the people moved away, and the mounds fell silent. Scholars debate why. Some say it was climate change, a drought that made farming impossible. Others suggest warfare or internal conflict. Still others point to disease or the collapse of trade networks. Whatever the cause, Spiro was left to the earth, its secrets buried beneath grass and soil. For centuries, the site lay forgotten. Local people knew of the mounds, but few understood their significance. Then came the looters, followed by archaeologists, and slowly the story of Spiro began to emerge. Today, the site is protected as the Spiro Mounds Archaeological Center. Tribes such as the Caddo Nation, the Osage, and others recognize it as part of their heritage, a sacred place that connects them to their ancestors. Visitors can walk among the mounds, see the reconstructed artifacts in museums, and feel the weight of history in the quiet air. But even now, mysteries remain. We still do not know the full meaning of the symbols carved into copper and stone. We still debate the exact reasons for the city's collapse. And we still search for the voices of the people themselves, voices that were silenced centuries ago. Every artifact is a clue, every mound a chapter in a story that is still being written. Some call Spiro the American Stonehenge. Others call it the City of the Dead. Whatever the name, it stands as a reminder that history is deeper than we often imagine. Long before Europeans arrived, long before Oklahoma was mapped and settled, a great civilization rose and fell here. Its people built monuments, created art, and carried out rituals that bound them to the cosmos. They lived, they dreamed, they believed, and they left behind traces of their world. As we look at Spiro today, we are challenged to remember that Native American history is not only a story of survival after colonization, it is also a story of great achievements, of cities and cultures that rivaled anything in the world. Spiro Mounds is proof of that. It is proof that on this continent, in this land, human imagination and creativity reached heights that we are only beginning to understand. So the next time you drive through the hills of eastern Oklahoma, look closer at the land. Beneath the grass and trees are the bones of leaders, the echoes of rituals, and the whispers of a forgotten city. Spiro is still there, waiting, teaching, reminding us that the past is never truly gone. It lives in the earth, in the artifacts, and in the stories we tell. This is the mystery of Spiro Mounds, America's lost ancient civilization, hidden in plain sight. In the quiet landscapes of southwestern Oklahoma, far from the bustling highways and modern towns, lies a place that holds echoes of one of the oldest human stories in North America. It is a place where ancient hunters once stalked their prey across the plains, where stone tools struck against bone, and where survival itself was carved into the very earth. This place is known as the Cooperton Folsom Site, and it connects us to a time more than 10,000 years ago, when the first Americans lived not in cities or villages, but in open landscapes where giant animals roamed, and human life depended on skill, knowledge, and community. When we speak of Cooperton, we are speaking of a world that looked very different from today. The last ice age had only recently ended. Massive glaciers were retreating to the north, and the climate was shifting. The land that would become Oklahoma was not the rolling farmland we see now. It was a place of open grasslands, dotted with patches of forest, rivers, and lakes. Across these plains moved great herds of animals, some familiar and some now extinct. Mammoths, mastodons, ancient bison, and even camels once walked here. It was a dangerous and challenging world, but it was also a world of opportunity for the people who learned to master it. These people were the Folsom hunters, one of the earliest known cultures in North America. The Folsom tradition is famous for its finely crafted stone points, long, slender spear tips with a distinctive channel flake down the center. These points were more than just weapons. They were masterpieces of technology designed for efficiency, strength, and precision. At Cooperton, archaeologists uncovered evidence of these hunters, their tools, their weapons, and the remains of the animals they pursued. Picture a small group of hunters moving across the prairie. The air is cool, the wind bends the tall grass, and on the horizon a herd of ancient bison grazes. These are not the bison we know today. They are larger, more powerful, with sweeping horns and massive shoulders. The hunters crouch low, signaling silently to one another. They carry spears tipped with carefully made Folsom points, points that could pierce hide and bone with deadly force. With strategy and courage, they move closer, ready to strike. At Cooperton, archaeologists discovered the remains of such hunts. The bones of animals, fractured and scattered, mixed with spear points and butchering tools, told the story of people who knew how to work together, who understood the behavior of their prey, and who used their tools with skill. Every broken bone is a memory of a meal shared, of survival achieved in a harsh world. What makes Cooperton so important is not only the presence of Folsom artifacts, but the age of the site. Radiocarbon dating places it at more than 10,000 years old, placing it among the oldest human occupations in Oklahoma and the southern plains. This was a time when the very first chapters of human history on this continent were being written. To stand at Cooperton is to stand where some of the earliest Americans once stood, their lives tied directly to the rhythms of nature and the great herds they followed. The tools found at Cooperton speak volumes about their makers. The Folsom points are not crude or simple. They show advanced knowledge of stone flaking, of how to strike a core with precision to create long, thin blades. One mistake could ruin hours of work. Yet these hunters mastered the technique, producing points so elegant and symmetrical that even modern flint knappers struggle to match them. Each point carried not only function, but also beauty, a reflection of skill passed down through generations. The site also reveals something deeper about these early people. It was not just about hunting, it was about community. Bringing down a massive bison required teamwork, planning, and cooperation. The meat would have fed many families. The hides became clothing and shelter. The bones became tools. Nothing was wasted. Life depended on sharing, and survival depended on trust. Cooperton is not only the story of individuals, but of entire groups working together to carve out existence in a challenging environment. As archaeologists worked at Cooperton, they pieced together the evidence carefully. Every artifact, every layer of soil, every fragment of bone was recorded and analyzed. Slowly, a picture emerged. This was not a permanent village. It was a seasonal camp, a place where hunters gathered during migrations, a place where lives intersected with the movements of animals. When the herds moved on, so did the people, carrying their tools and memories with them, leaving behind traces that would lie buried for thousands of years. But there is also mystery here. Who exactly were these people? Where did they come from? Archaeologists debate whether the Folsom hunters descended from even earlier groups, like the Clovis culture, or whether they developed independently. The connection between Clovis and Folsom is still a subject of research, and Cooperton adds a crucial piece to that puzzle. The transition from hunting mammoths with Clovis points to hunting bison with Folsom points may reflect a shift in the environment, a change in available prey, and an adaptation that ensured survival. And yet, much remains unknown. The voices of the Cooperton hunters are silent. We do not know the language they spoke, the songs they sang, or the stories they told by firelight. We can only imagine them, sitting around the embers after a long hunt, children listening to elders tell tales of the animals and the spirits of the land. Perhaps they spoke of ancestors who came from distant lands, or of dreams that guided the hunt. Perhaps they saw the stars as maps, the rivers as lifelines, the earth itself as alive. What we do know is that Cooperton stands as proof of their presence, proof that long before cities, long before agriculture, long before the history books begin, people were here, shaping their world. Every stone point is a signature, every butchered bone is a trace of life. Together, they remind us that history is far older and far richer than we often imagine. Today, the Cooperton Folsom site is quiet. The grass grows tall, the sky stretches wide, and the winds move across the land as they have for thousands of years. Few who pass by know the depth of its history, but beneath the soil lies evidence of courage, ingenuity, and resilience. For archaeologists, for native communities, and for all of us who seek to understand the past, Cooperton is a window into the first chapters of America's human story. It is easy to forget how long people have been here, how deeply rooted their presence is in this land. The hunters of Cooperton remind us that human history in North America did not begin with European arrival. It began tens of thousands of years ago, with people who crossed into new lands, adapted and thrived. Cooperton is one of the places where that truth is written in stone. As we reflect on this ancient site, we realize that it is not just about artifacts or bones. It is about memory. It is about honoring the first people who walked this land, who faced challenges we can hardly imagine, and who survived through intelligence and cooperation. They may be gone, but their legacy remains in every flaked point, in every trace of fire, in every scar of a hunt carved into the bones of ancient animals. Cooperton is more than a site. It is a story of hunters and herds, of stone and survival, of people whose footprints have long since faded, but whose presence still lingers in the Oklahoma soil. It is a reminder that the roots of humanity here are deep, ancient, and enduring. And as long as we continue to uncover and listen to these stories, the voices of the first Americans will never be forgotten. In the windswept plains of eastern New Mexico, a quiet stretch of land hides one of the greatest discoveries in the story of human history in the Americas. Long before cities, long before agriculture, even before the mounds and civilizations that rose later, a group of ancient hunters walked these lands. They left behind their tools, their weapons, and the bones of the massive creatures they hunted. And thousands of years later, their world would be uncovered in a place now called Blackwater Draw. This is the story of the Clovis people, and how their discovery changed everything we thought we knew about the first Americans. Imagine the scene. More than 13,000 years ago, the Ice Age still gripped the world, glaciers covering vast portions of the north, mammoths and mastodons roaming the grasslands, and saber-toothed cats stalking their prey. Into this harsh but rich landscape came small bands of people. They were hunters and gatherers, following herds, moving with the seasons, surviving on their skill and their tools. For decades, scientists debated whether humans had lived in the Americas that long ago. Many insisted that people arrived only a few thousand years before Columbus, but the Clovis discovery would prove them wrong. In the 1920s and 1930s, ranchers and scientists began noticing strange stone spear points near the town of Clovis, New Mexico. These were not ordinary arrowheads. They were larger, beautifully fluted, crafted with incredible precision. And they were found alongside the bones of animals long extinct, mammoths, ancient bison, giant ground sloths. The connection was unmistakable. These stone points were not recent. They belonged to hunters who had lived at the very end of the Ice Age. The site at Blackwater Draw became the heart of this revelation. As excavations began, layer after layer of evidence emerged. In one layer, the bones of mammoths, their rib cages crushed by spears. Nearby, the distinctive Clovis points, razor-sharp, made from chert and obsidian. The people who made them were not primitive wanderers. They were master craftsmen, their technology advanced, their hunting strategy organized. Imagine standing in the tall grass, watching as a group of hunters worked together to bring down a 10-ton mammoth using only stone-tipped spears and coordination. It was a battle of survival, and they won. The discovery sent shockwaves through archaeology. Until then, most scholars believed humans had not lived in the Americas more than a few thousand years. But the radiocarbon dates from Clovis sites pushed the timeline back more than 13,000 years. Suddenly, the history of the continent had to be rewritten. The Clovis culture became the benchmark. The earliest known Americans, skilled hunters who spread rapidly across the land. Their artifacts were soon found not only in New Mexico, but across North America, from the East Coast to the Pacific, even into Central America. The Clovis people were everywhere. But who were they? And where did they come from? That mystery continues to fuel debates even today. The traditional theory suggested they came from Siberia, crossing the Bering Land Bridge when sea levels were lower, moving through an ice-free corridor into the heart of the continent. Others suggest they might have also traveled along the Pacific coast by boat, following the shorelines. Some even propose far more controversial ideas, that people may have reached the Americas from Europe during the Ice Age, though that idea remains highly debated. At Blackwater Draw, though, the evidence was undeniable. The Clovis people were real. They lived, they hunted, they thrived. Their tools were unlike anything else, and their legacy remained buried until the 20th century. What makes the site even more haunting is what happened to them. Around 12,800 years ago, the Clovis culture seemed to vanish. The mammoths and many other Ice Age animals went extinct around the same time. Some scientists believe overhunting by the Clovis people played a role. Others point to rapid climate change as the glaciers retreated. There is even a controversial theory of a cosmic impact, a comet striking the Earth, causing fires, floods, and extinctions. Whatever the cause, the great hunters disappeared, leaving only their tools and bones behind. Today, when you walk across the dusty land at Blackwater Draw, it may look ordinary, just a quiet patch of New Mexico desert. But beneath your feet lies the story of humanity's arrival in the New World. The site is now protected, with a small museum and trails where visitors can see the excavation pits. Standing there, you can imagine the hunters camped by the water, sharpening their spear points, preparing for the hunt. You can picture the mammoth herds moving slowly across the plains, unaware that humans with deadly skill were waiting. The Clovis discovery is more than just an archaeological site. It shattered assumptions. It proved that people were here long before we thought. It connected us to a world almost unimaginable, a world of giants, of survival, of courage. And it reminded us that history is always waiting to be uncovered, sometimes in the most unexpected places. Even now, new Clovis sites are found, each one adding a piece to the puzzle. From Texas to Montana, from Mexico to Canada, the legacy of these hunters is written in stone and bone. Some sites even show traces of campfires, cooking areas, and family life. These were not just hunters, they were communities, families struggling together, telling stories around the fire, looking at the same stars we see today. The mystery remains. Were the Clovis truly the first Americans, or were there others before them? In recent years, sites older than Clovis have been claimed, such as in Texas, Chile, and even on the East Coast. If those claims are true, then the Clovis people were not the first, but perhaps the most widespread and successful. Yet for nearly a century, their discovery defined the beginning of American history. And so, the story of Blackwater Draw is not just about bones and stone tools. It is about the quest to understand where we come from. It is about the hunters who faced mammoths and won. It is about a vanished culture that still speaks through the sharp edges of their fluted points. When you hold a Clovis point in your hand, you hold a piece of human ingenuity, survival, and mystery, crafted more than 13,000 years ago and still sharp enough to cut. The winds of New Mexico still blow across the plains, carrying dust and whispers of the past. The land looks quiet, but underneath lies one of the greatest stories of human migration and survival. Blackwater Draw is not just a site on a map. It is a doorway to the Ice Age, a window into the courage and resilience of the first Americans. And as long as we keep searching, the Clovis people will never truly be forgotten. In the rolling grasslands of the southern Great Plains, long before cities, before writing, and before the rise of great civilizations, a group of ancient hunters left behind their mark. What they created was not a city, not a monument, but something far simpler and yet profoundly important: stone tools and the remains of the great animals they pursued. This is the story of the Folsom people and the site that forever changed our understanding of the first Americans. The year was 1908, when a powerful rainstorm tore across northern New Mexico. The floodwaters cut deep into a dry arroyo near the small town of Folsom. When the waters receded, something unusual appeared: large bones protruding from the exposed earth. To most eyes, they seemed like the remains of cattle, but the bones were much too big. They were fossilized, ancient, belonging to animals that no longer walked the earth. For years, the bones drew curiosity, but it was not until the 1920s that the true significance of the site was uncovered. A cowboy named George McJunkin first noticed the bones and realized they were not from cows. He had an unusual curiosity for natural history and collected fossils and artifacts. Though he died before excavations began, it was his discovery that would trigger one of the most important moments in American archaeology. Scientists soon descended on the site, and what they found stunned them. The bones belonged to an extinct species of giant bison, far larger than those we know today, and buried between their ribs, almost perfectly placed, were delicate stone spear points. These were no ordinary tools. The Folsom points, as they came to be known, were small, finely crafted and fluted down the center. The craftsmanship was astonishing. These were not the crude, rough stones many expected from Ice Age hunters. They were symmetrical, sharp, and made with incredible skill. And most important of all, they were found directly within the skeletons of extinct animals. That meant only one thing: humans had hunted these creatures. The implications were enormous. Until then, many scholars firmly believed that humans had not lived in the Americas more than a few thousand years. Some thought the continent had been populated only shortly before the arrival of Europeans. The discovery at Folsom destroyed that idea forever. Here was undeniable proof that people had lived in North America at least 10,000 years ago, hunting giant Ice Age animals that had long since disappeared. It was a revelation. The Folsom site became a turning point in archaeology. Teams carefully excavated the area, uncovering more bones and more spear points, all locked in the same ancient layer of earth. Radiocarbon dating was still new, but as techniques improved, the age of the site became clearer. The hunters had lived more than 10,000 years ago, in a world where massive herds of bison roamed the plains and where survival demanded cooperation and skill. Imagine that world. The landscape was open grassland, stretching to the horizon, dotted with rivers and watering holes. Herds of giant bison, some weighing nearly 2,000 pounds, moved in vast numbers. For small bands of hunters armed only with stone-tipped spears, bringing down such an animal was both dangerous and essential. A single kill meant food, hides and bones for tools. Success required planning, teamwork and courage. The Folsom hunters were not reckless. They understood the herds, the migration patterns and the land. They set ambushes, drove animals into traps, and struck with deadly precision. The points they left behind tell us about their lives. Each one required hours of work, carefully chipping flakes from a stone until the shape emerged. The fluting, the distinctive channel carved down the center, was not decoration. It allowed the spear point to be hafted securely to a shaft, making it both strong and aerodynamic. No two points are identical, yet all share the same remarkable craftsmanship. Holding one today, you can feel the balance, the sharpness, the evidence of human intelligence from over 10,000 years ago. For archaeologists, the Folsom discovery was like opening a doorway into the Ice Age. It confirmed that ancient people had lived alongside now extinct animals. It pushed human history in the Americas back thousands of years earlier than most had believed, and it raised new questions. Who were these hunters? Where had they come from? And what happened to them? The Folsom people lived after the time of the Clovis culture, which had hunted mammoths several thousand years earlier. As the great mammoths disappeared, likely victims of changing climate and human hunting, the Folsom people turned their focus to bison. They became experts in tracking and killing them, adapting their tools and strategies. Their world was still harsh and dangerous, but they thrived for centuries, leaving behind campsites, butchering areas, and the tools that survive today. At Cooperton in Oklahoma, another Folsom site, excavations revealed similar evidence. Hunters had killed bison, butchered the meat, and left their tools behind. Each discovery added to the growing picture of how these people lived. They were not wanderers without purpose. They were organized, intelligent, and skilled in survival. The Folsom discovery also carried a deeper meaning. It proved that history is never fixed. What people once dismissed as impossible, that humans had lived in America more than 10,000 years ago, was suddenly undeniable. One discovery in a quiet arroyo overturned centuries of assumptions. It showed that evidence, patiently waiting in the earth, can rewrite the story of humanity. Even today, the Folsom site continues to teach us. The bones and tools are preserved in museums, the excavation pits protected for visitors. Standing at the site, you can still imagine the hunters crouched in the grass, watching a herd of bison approach. You can feel the tension as they prepare their spears, the danger as they charge, and the triumph as they succeed. It is a story of survival, ingenuity, and courage, written not in books but in stone and bone. The Folsom people eventually disappeared, their culture fading as climates shifted and animals changed. But their legacy endures. The tools they left are still sharp. The bones still carry the marks of their weapons. And the story of their discovery reminds us that human history is deeper, older, and far more mysterious than we once believed. Across the plains, countless sites remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered. Each one may hold another piece of the puzzle, another story of how people lived at the edge of survival. The Folsom hunters are gone, but their spirit remains in every carefully fluted point, every bone pierced by stone. They speak across 10 millennia, telling us that we have always been explorers, always been survivors, and always been storytellers.